My name's Robin, and I make bicycles, so there's the AA style introduction. I'm going to start off by showing you a short film that was made as part of the Rafa Continental project by Nick Hand. As soon as we get the sound switched over, I think we can do that. As the film showed, I make bicycle frames and forks and stems and racks, and then I assemble them into bikes that typically look something like this. I work on my own and I use fairly traditional materials and techniques, and I make about 20 or so bikes a year. So how did I end up doing this? Partly it was because I was quite bad at doing other things, but also because of where I came from. I grew up in a small village. My dad and granddad were both metal workers, so I was kind of really surrounded by things being fabricated. There's a rather messy picture of the workshop where there were plenty of tools, materials, and I was encouraged to get my hands dirty and make mistakes, and so that's what I did. I also, of course, like most kids, I rode my bike, not very competently most of the time. I went on and made my first bike in 1992 as an A-level project, closely followed by the second one, which was slightly experimental, and then the third one, which was starting to settle down a little bit then. So I've been thinking about where the urge to make things comes from. Basically, it's because I enjoy it, and it's rather superficial to say so, but it's just fun, and it's satisfying, and it's fulfilling. So the process of turning something that's imagined, it starts off just as a set of lines, sometimes on a bit of paper or screen, and then becomes a pile of tubes and lugs, and ultimately a bicycle, which it happens to be, the one that's down in the corner here. So that process is from imagining the thing and turning it into something tangible is very satisfying. But I could make other things. I choose to make bicycles. Partly it's because I ride them and I find them fascinating. The interaction between the rider and the bicycle is very subtle and complex. Sorry, going ahead of myself. The laws of physics are very obvious when you're riding a bicycle, the gravity and the wind resistance. And I'm a little bit of a nerd about physics, so that kind of interests me. They respond very well to reductionist design, so you make them lighter and simpler and they become better, and you can't make them bigger and more complex and put a more powerful engine in them. You have to be quite disciplined with them. And they are finally actually a very good fit with the kind of business model that I use, which is just me on my own using craft processes which are very traditional. I think probably if I attempted to make cathedrals or microchips, I'd be disappointed. So why are bicycles such a good fit with the craft processes? First and most obviously, they're the right size for a human to work on his own. Secondly, I think that craft has to evolve very slowly, whereas art can make radical changes very quickly and can make mistakes and perhaps should make mistakes, and engineering can make giant leaps of application as long as the fundamental principles are understood. Craft has to learn by its mistakes, and it has to be cautious if the thing that it makes or the thing that I make is functional and safe. I can't take too many risks, so craft evolves very slowly, and so does the bicycle. So this is arguably the first modern bicycle. It's made in 1839, and it's pretty much the same shape as bicycles are today, so that very slow evolution suits the craft process very well. I'm now going to do something which I've never done in my life, and I'm likely never to do again, which is quote Aristotle. We consider that the architects in every profession are more estimable and know more and are wiser than the artisans, because they know the reasons of the things which are done. And I felt I had to include this, but I'm actually very ambivalent about the message. Engineers do understand things, but it's wrong, I think, to say that artisans or craftspeople or me doesn't understand things. Excuse me. I feel personally, and I think most artisans would, we understand how to make things that work, but it's empirical knowledge. You figure it out as you go along. You learn it from someone who's been doing it for a long time. It's not theoretical and you don't get it from a book. So the fundamental principles with the bicycle, they're interesting, but they're not essential. Having established then that craft and bicycles go pretty well together, I started thinking about what craft actually means to me personally. So let's start to the next slide. It's a process that cannot be completely described in words or diagrams. So that really means it's about the subtlety of working with your hands and how you use the torch to heat the joint and what the flux looks like when the metals reach the right temperature and how the silver flows through it when you're doing that. It's just impossible to draw a picture of that happening. You just have to do it and try it and screw it up a few times. So you've got to do those things and you've got to think about it while you're doing it. So there's a little sequence of pictures here to give an example of that. So this is a typical seat lug with some felt tip marks that I've made. So just as the lug is delivered, it's a bit kind of clunky and not very elegant. So I just want to take some material off it to make it look nicer. So this is the indulgent, arty bit of the process. This isn't anything to do with engineering, really. So you mark it out and then start cutting little holes in it and paying attention to what you're doing, because really you can screw it up very quickly. And then shaping the outside of the lug, making rough cuts with a hacksaw, and then finishing off with a file, and then when that's braced into the frame, hopefully it looks something like this. So it's a fairly laborious process, and you've got to pay attention to what you're doing while you're doing it, otherwise it goes wrong very quickly. So this idea of things going wrong quickly is quite widespread in craft, and it's described by a guy called David Pye as the workmanship of risk, and that means that at any moment, whether through inattention or inexperience or accident, the workman is liable to ruin the job. So that possibility of making a complete balls up is perhaps what defines craft. And you can contrast that at the other end of the scale, the workmanship of certainty, where the quality of the end result is predetermined and beyond the control of the operative. So those are two extremes, but it's a continuum. So this is my frame jig. And any jig, basically, it increases certainty and removes risk. So I don't sit in a wood cabin whittling away. I have tools and equipment that I hope will make things easier for me. But I think I'm probably still closer to the risk end of the scale than the Honda Robots end of the scale. So what's the point of doing things in a way which is risky? Wouldn't it be better to make everything in a way that guarantees success every time? Again, back to David Pye, the workmanship of certainty can do nearly everything well except produce diversity. And it's diversity which makes our environment rich and engaging and gives us something to look at, and objects that we might cherish, hopefully, rather than just being kind of disposable tools. So an example of diversity and richness, perhaps, is a picture of a fairly ordinary-looking bicycle. And you can tell from across the street that it's a bicycle. It's obviously a bicycle. It's got wheels and handlebars and saddle, and the frame is bicycle-shaped. But then as you get closer to it, more levels of detail are revealed. So there's, the guy who made this bicycle works with wind turbines, so he wanted a little miniature wind turbine cut out of stainless steel and stuck to his bicycle, but that's not something you can see from across the street. So this idea of richness and layers of detail is something that craft can do very well, but mass production doesn't really offer us. The other thing that the workmanship of risk and craft can do, it allows spontaneity and improvisations, and we can also adjust our course. If things don't seem to be going quite according to plan, we can modify them as we go along. And hopefully I've got another. Here we go. This is a bicycle I made recently. And I'm going to use the front rack as an example here, because the front rack was a complete bitch to make, and I ended up making it 3 times. And the reason I didn't like it first time wasn't because it wasn't correct according to the drawing that I had. It was because it didn't feel right as I was making it. So I had the tubes tacked together and held them up to the bike, and it just looked wrong. So I pulled it apart and made it again, and it still wasn't right. So the third time lucky. And then there's a picture of the rack in progress on the jig. Another jig, kind of a slightly Heath Robinson jig, that one. What else does Risk? Risk offers us these checks and balances. And when you're making something that's actually going to be used by a human, and you're a human being that's making this thing also, there's a pretty good chance that you're if something feels wrong to the maker, then it's also going to feel wrong to the user. So that's another a useful check. But finally, this idea of risk and certainty, and I'm not on a complete downer with the workmanship and certainty. It offers us a lot, and I have to acknowledge that as a craftsman, I actually only make quite a small part of the bicycle, and that the workmanship and certainty is responsible for lots of other bits, like the chain, for example. If I tried to make a chain myself, it would take me weeks and it would be a terrible chain. So I rely on a Japanese factory to make my chains. I think it's important just to realise that. And however, the craftsmanship of Risk does still offer us, I think, an important addition to the workmanship of certainty. And I think that's the end of my talk. So thank you very much.